Hi, and welcome to the National New Teacher Support Podcast brought to you by New Teacher University. And I'm your host, Dr. Terry Ross. Today, guys, I'm so excited to have a repeat guest with me. She's returning by popular demand, and now she's adjunct faculty, Miss Jennifer Felton. She's here again to talk about her book. She's here to talk about her new book, Teaching in the Now, Classroom Momentum Begins with You. And I'm so happy to have Ms. Felton back with us today because today we're going to talk about the attention thief.
Oh,
And I was
yeah.
so intrigued by that chapter because it made me go down a time tunnel to see, was I an attention thief or am I an attention thief now? Here at New Teacher University, teachers, we always want you to be ahead of the curve. This is on-demand learning that you can pick up anytime, and I can tell you it's always from quality guests and quality presenters because Ms. Felton is an award-winning teacher and coach. And today we're going to find out, are we the attention thief? So, Ms. Felton, if you would reintroduce yourself to the audience because everyone may not have seen you the last time, tell us who you are and why did you start Bridging Minds Educational Consulting?
All right. So good evening, everyone. Good morning, good afternoon, wherever you
Yes.
are. I'm Jennifer Felton, Bridging Minds Education Consultant. I started it because I felt like, when teachers are in a room, it can be a very lonely endeavor. And there are tons of books, there are tons of programs. However, I just wanted to give teachers that personalized attention. Somebody who can really help guide them to greatness. And I know that is pretty much an act of love because once you're in that classroom, it really takes somebody who's non-judgmental to help guide you through it and
Yes.
somebody who's been there before. And so I started Bridging Minds just to kind of help teachers bridge what they've learned about education and kind of bridge that with what happens in real life, right? And so that's why we started it, and I'm excited to keep this conversation going today.
Well, thank you so much, and I'm so glad you came back with us. Before we get into it, this is the second semester, and we're so thankful that our new teachers came back. They came back from Thanksgiving break, they came back from Christmas break, and now we've gone through Valentine's Day. We're getting ready for spring break soon, and this is that time of year that it gets kind of like we're in the middle of it right now. What
Yeah.
advice would you just give new teachers before we even get into our topic at this point to keep them encouraged and keep them knowing that they matter and that they make a difference?
Man, I would say to them, slow down.
Yeah,
Because right now is the time of year where everything feels like it is moving so fast. You got testing coming up, and you got all of the breaks coming up, winter break here in Georgia. Um, Florida is getting ready for spring break. And so slow down because if you are running 1,000 miles an hour, ask yourself who is running with you. Are your students able to even keep up with your pace? And so slow down, reflect on what's happening, and just remember that day you show up refreshed, show up excited. This year is going to finish no matter what you do. So just slow down and enjoy the
yes.
rest of.
Thank you so much. That is excellent advice to slow down. I was recently talking to some new teachers, and I told them they're teaching the entire class period. Teach for about 10 to 15 minutes and facilitate the rest of the class
Yeah.
period. This is
Yes.
the time of year that the students need to be working. They would love to be engaged in some group projects and things like that now, and they can learn by doing group projects. And a group project doesn't mean poster boards and glitter. It could be a paper that they're working on. It could be a summary that they're
Yeah.
working on. There are a number of things that you can do. So thank you so much for sharing that. And today we're going to talk about chapter 12 in your book, Attention Thief.
Yes.
And a lot of things crossed my mind when I read Attention Thief. Tell us what inspired you to write Attention Thief and what is an attention thief?
Ooh, that's a tough one, right? So, what inspired me to write it? I think, again, based on what you said at the beginning about this time of year, slowing down,
Yes.
right? And being reflective. And so what inspired me to write this chapter was simply because during this time of year, and you begin to have a lot of different initiatives. Um, every school has their theme, but a lot of different initiatives are coming down the pipe as we are responding to what we are seeing happening. And so one of the reasons I wanted to write this particular chapter was because I think sometimes we focus on everything but what matters.
Yes.
And in the classroom, you have to be able to maintain a student's attention. That is the pathway to learning. That's the gateway. And if you're doing everything, I mean, you're doing everything, but you don't have their attention, where does it really land? And
Absolutely.
how impactful is it? So I was inspired to write it after just seeing teachers running a million miles an hour and then feeling hurt or feeling disappointed because they may not be getting the results that they were looking for when it comes to student growth and student achievement. And for me, as a woman of color, working with majority students of color, my goal, like when I enter into a classroom, my goal is for student achievement and growth. Um, so you're doing so many things, but you're not getting growth in student achievement.
Yes.
And that inspired me to write this chapter. How do we get that? And the way we get that is through attention.
Absolutely. And when you said sometimes we focus on the things that are not important, I think that's how you phrased it. Oftentimes I found out when we focus on that, that's because we haven't planned or we're not following the plan. Because when
Mhm.
teachers plan, they follow that plan, and distractions don't really take them off of it if they're invested in it. So that's one of the things I
Mhm. Mhm.
found out, that when we're focusing on other things outside of what we're supposed to be focusing on, that's a way for us to get away from the real stuff, the real work. So we want to make sure that our teachers know and understand that, hey, this is the real deal. And that when we're in there and we have those 45 minutes or 55 minutes with our students, that we're in there to invest in them.
You have to come in there with intentionality and you have to come in there with a plan because if, like you said, if you don't have that plan, you will get sidetracked because that is school. And that's what I talk about in the chapter, understanding what is school, because distractions will occur, but how do you handle them? And sometimes, because we have a lot of initiatives put upon us, you're trying to execute all of the initiatives and you're going from one thing to the next thing, to the do now, to the small group, to the this, to the that, but you're not paying attention to whether or not you have the attention of the students. And then you just begin to move through the motions. And so I write this chapter for teachers to engage in self-reflection, but
Yes.
also to give you some tools and tips to pretty much be able to say, okay, this is what's happening right now. How do I respond? Because going back to a plan, I've looked at several lesson plans, but if that lesson plan does not take into consideration the behaviors that you have in the room, it's going to be thwarted every time. Like,
Mhm, mhm,
because the
mhm.
kids, they come in, they're ready. So
Yeah.
you have to make a plan that includes other things besides curriculum. And so for your new teacher, when I was a new teacher, I wanted to teach. That was it. I only planned to execute the lesson. But there are so many other things that live in a classroom, right?
Yes.
Beside the lesson. And so we talk about that in this chapter.
So thank you for that, because what you're trying to prevent, it sounds as if you don't want new teachers and they're going through the plan and they get to the end of the plan, but the students are still at the do now or the I do. So,
Their
and that
mind is still
happens.
there. That listen, you get in there, and I've sat in the back of classrooms, and it's a beautiful lesson. It's a beautiful lesson, but the kids are not with you.
Yes.
And so what are you doing to make sure that they are with you every step of the way?
Okay, well, let's get into it then,
Let's
Professor
get into
Felton.
it.
Let's talk about this attention thief. You come in your own way, and we'll go from there.
Say that part again. I missed it.
I said, come in your own way, and we'll go from there. Let's just start talking about the attention thief. Pretend as if you're
Okay.
thinking, I'm your first year teacher, and we're starting from
Okay.
the beginning.
So, okay. So talking about what happens with it. The biggest thing I think, if you were a first year teacher and I was observing your lesson, one of the things that I would want you to know is a couple of different classroom dynamics, right? So, student versus self. When I say student versus self, what does that mean to you?
My daydreaming. I think about me daydreaming. I think about me fiddling around. I think about me in my backpack not being organized. If we're talking about attention,
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
student versus self, I think about me not being distracted without having to have my neighbor distracted.
All right. What student versus student? What would that be to you?
Oh, that's me and my guys. We doing what we do.
We doing what we do in the classroom. We
Absolutely.
talking, we laughing, we beating on the table.
Yes,
What it is, I'm making a little joke. I'm entertaining, I'm being entertaining.
absolutely.
Those are two things that you need to know will happen in the classroom. Students will entertain themselves, students will entertain each other, but that means that their attention is not with you.
Yes.
It's not with you. It is somewhere else. What about if I say to you another dynamic that I try to get to understand is school versus classroom.
Mm.
School versus classroom.
You want
What do
me to
you think?
answer that?
Yeah, what is that to you? School versus classroom.
Announcements throughout the class period.
Yes.
Sending for students without any regard of where we are in the lesson. Allowing students to enter the classroom at any period after the bell sound. Like we did a first five, we did a first 10 and last 10. And one time we did a first 15, last 15. Like the first 15 minutes after the bell, nothing moves. If you're late, you just have to
Nothing
wait.
moved.
And the last 15 minutes, nothing moves because we're opening and we're closing, and we don't want you to miss anything. And do not make an all call without getting approval if it's not between the bells. You can do it between the bells, and that's it.
But listen, so here's the thing, when I'm in buildings, I can tell if maybe it's transitional leadership or something's going on, if there's constant all calls throughout a period, because you're up there trying to teach and then an all call comes on. You're up there trying to do this and then somebody comes to your classroom looking for a student. The phone is ringing. But here's the thing, these things will happen. And when they happen, what I say to teachers are, what is your plan?
Yeah.
What is your plan for when that happens? Because guess what? It steals my attention. I'm like, oh, who are they looking for? Like, and so these are things that we have to pay attention to. So let's keep it moving. So we did student versus student, student
Yes.
versus self, classroom, well, school versus classroom, and then teacher versus student. Teacher versus student. What that is the one that everybody dreads.
Yes.
It doesn't have to be something big though. It could be something as simple as a redirect.
Yes.
It could be something as simple as you're checking your backpack, looking for some homework from 3 weeks ago, and I say to you, hey, can you work on this for me? Can you do that for me? That is teacher versus student. Anything that becomes a student versus and teacher interaction. Doesn't have to be something bad, but one of the things that I write about in the chapter is rubbernecking.
Mhm.
Again, we're talking about attention. So if you handle this situation, new teacher, with care, you might use some nonverbal, you might use, just a nice voice, you might have them step out, then your goal is not to distract the rest of the classroom. That's what I call minor. You want their attention to continue. But if you handle this teacher versus student in a loud way,
Mhm.
in a way where you gotta be, the boss, in a
Yes.
way where you want to demand the power and the respect, then you got a situation. Because not only do you have a fight flight situation with the student, anytime you have an interaction, now you have a fight versus flight student situation with the student. And if you mishandle it, again, what happens to the attention of the other students who might be working? And let's say they're not working. Let's say you were doing the whole group instruction. What happens to their attention? So you and this student kind of have this little tussle, not physical, just verbal. But now you want me to be able to just go back to listening to this math lesson.
Yes.
Attention doesn't work that way. It
Yes.
just doesn't work that way. So I say to my teachers, how are you going to handle that situation? Is that in your plan? And then the last one, which is the big one that we talk about, is teacher versus teacher, or teacher versus self. This is the one that nobody talks about. This is the you know what? This is the answer to your question. This is why I wrote the book, because nobody talks about what happens when you're battling with your own thoughts.
Yes.
What happens when you are battling with your own things? I need to make a doctor's appointment. I'm not feeling well. I'm working on my PhD. I'm working on the project for the principal. I'm burnt out. I'm tired. I'm exhausted. Teacher versus self. And that also slows down attention. And so those are kind of like the big ones that we talk about in Attention Thief. And so we ask that question, the question, when we begin to total all of these things up, what's the question?
How much
Am I
class
the
time are we
enemy?
losing?
Mhm.
Mhm.
How much time? So I know I rattled on about that quite a bit, but nobody
No, that
talks
was
about those
perfect.
things.
That was
Nobody
perfect.
talks about it. And if you lose a minute to this and you lose 3 minutes to that, and you lose 5 minutes over here, and the kid is in his book bag for another 2 minutes, and at the end of that 45-minute instructional block, how much of their attention did you really hold as far as the instruction is concerned? And so nobody talks about that. We talk about a lot of things, but we don't talk about that.
Yes, and those are distractions. Those are major distractions, and we want to make sure that our teachers know that that engagement piece in the process, that'll cut out a lot of the attention thief things. If you have quality engagement pieces while you're teaching and not just worksheets and lecture. Are your students in cooperative groups? Have you grouped them by who they are? Did you get a chance to know them at the beginning of the year so that you
Mhm.
can know what Terry is going to do? Have you observed
Yeah.
Terry enough in the first 6 weeks of school that you'll say, okay, 5 minutes in, I need to go and stand by him with proximity because he's going to start fiddling or he's going to start talking to his crew over there. Do I need to move him? So thank you so much for sharing all of this. Because our teachers need it. Let's go in detail about some things that teachers can do
Mhm.
to help with that. In fact, you had one question in the book that I want to read, and you said, so how do you address the alerting behavior while managing classroom momentum? That's a question
Yes.
that you have in the book, and I really like that question. And I said I was going to highlight it to ask that. So how
Yeah,
can you address all of those different things that you just discussed, the student to student, student to self, student to environment, and then school to classroom environment?
I think first and foremost, you have to, what I call, you have to take account of what is currently happening,
Mm-hmm.
right? Bring in one of your fellow teacher friends if you don't want to bring in a coach. Bring in your teacher bestie to go through those dynamics and kind of give you what's happening so that you can see what your areas of strength and what your areas of weakness, I won't say weakness, area of opportunities are. But once you figure out what your areas of opportunities are, make a plan for them. So one of the things I would say, school versus classroom, they're going to always call your classroom. What is your procedure when the front office or someone calls your classroom? Oftentimes, if I'm up at the board teaching, sometimes my phone would be on the other side of the classroom. So what did I do? I trained a student how to answer my phone. And we use that as an opportunity to teach some soft skills, So phone would ring, good morning, good afternoon. This is Miss Felton's classroom. She's teaching right now. Can you hold for one moment? I would teach my students how to pick up my phone. And they knew not to embarrass me. So pick up my phone with some class and sophistication, If somebody comes to my room to get a student, what is the plan? My students know when somebody walk in my classroom, we shut it down. If somebody walks in my classroom, they know that I need to finish what I'm saying so that I can make sure that I don't break that attention.
Yes.
And once the attention breaks, then one of the questions I put in the book is, what is your re-engagement plan? Do you review where you picked up? Do you kind of go back to the classroom and say, okay, guys, I know we had a quick interruption. Who can remind me where we were? Who can kind of tell me what we were just talking about to kind of bring it back to instruction? Because if you jump right back into the lesson, which is what a lot of people do, right? You jump right back into the lesson, but me, the student, my mind is still wondering why this person came to the door. Or why did Johnny have to go with Miss Johnson? How do you re-engage instruction? Because I will say this, I suffer, all my teacher friends know I have an attention deficit. So you will think I'm paying attention, you really will. And I've been like this forever, like even when I was in school, which is probably why I know what's going on. You would think I'm paying attention, but I'm not. My mind is still somewhere else. So how do you re-engage your class? What strategy do you have in place?
Yes.
So those are the types of things like I try to encourage teachers to say, okay, what is the plan for re-engagement? If it's a student versus student or student versus self, I always try to minimize that. And I write the best way to minimize that is with some good old fashioned stares, some good old fashioned body language, some good old fashioned just, looking at a kid and smiling. Because what I don't want to do is turn something little into something big.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
Because once you do that, throw the whole class away. And nobody learned anything. Y'all was just in there talking for 45 minutes.
So I was reading a section in your book where you
Yeah.
talked about the body language and you actually gave some cues on what to do. Please go through that for the new teachers because they would benefit that. You talked about folding your arms. Could you mind talking about that?
Yeah. So, everybody has their own style, right? And I think first and foremost, figure out what your style is, but understand the more you do your body language, the more kids will get it. And if I see a kid is not getting it, like, for me, I'm going to just stare you down. I'm going to look at you for a while. And if I see that that's not working, I'm going to move into proximity. Now, if proximity doesn't work, I might just move into like, oh man, I might I might then become very direct, and I might say something like, man, I've been staring you down, and I would think the stare down would work, but the stare down is just not working. Usually when you stare somebody down, that means you're trying to redirect or something. Then
Absolutely.
kids might be like, oh, so you train kids
Yes.
as you're doing it, but body language, coughing, making noises, just doing
Hmm.
anything that gets their attention, but doesn't cause a major interruption to your class. Because every time you have an interruption to your class, you already know what happens to the attention. It goes less, it begins to come down.
Yes.
And that's what we want to try to minimize. I've seen the best teachers, they have great presence and they have control. Some of them rule it with the iron fist, but they're not getting the growth, the academic growth that they want. Kids are well behaved in the room, but the attention does not, is not continuous enough for the learning to be sealed in. Does that make sense? So
Yes.
you need continuous attention. I need to be able to focus on something for an amount of time to learn it, process it, and seal it in.
Absolutely. And I want to just piggyback off of something that you said about you can appear that you're paying attention.
Mm.
And I want new teachers to know and understand that just because you have gotten your class to a point where they know not to talk in here, they
Ooh,
may know not to talk, but do you have their attention?
right.
And that's the question. Do you are you managing with fear and coercion, or have you built a community that they feel comfortable enough to say something and know that once you make the look, they know that that means stop. And that's a very respectful interaction that it's not disrespectful for an 11-year-old to talk because an 11-year-old is just coming into that space where they have new words and new things that they can say and new freedom. So they're going to talk all the time. However, the respectful piece comes in at is that when you look at them, do they stop? When you give your cues
Mhm.
that you've put out there, does it redirect them the way it should? So it's not that they're being disrespectful when things are happening. What they're being 11-year-old. It's how they respond to
They're
your
being
cue.
11-year-old. And you have to I'm a call and response girl. And the reason that I'm a call and response girl, and I believe in a good call and response. And the cheesier it is, the better. Because my goal is I don't care talking during your time. That's your time to talk. That's your time to process the information. That's your time to grow. Because if you're not processing the information, it doesn't stick. But when
Mm-hmm.
I do whatever my cheesy call and response is, if I say peanut butter, you say jelly. I expect you to say jelly when I say peanut butter, and I expect your attention to be on me
Yes.
because now we are about to seal in the learning, if that makes sense. One tip I'll give, I see a lot of people who may do call and response. A lot of people like to do the three claps or 1, 2, buckle my shoe, whatever it is that you do. But if you allow only 3 kids to respond to your
Mm-hmm.
call,
Yes.
throw it out the window
Yes.
because it's not doing what it's supposed to do. So when I do a call and response, the expectation is everybody stops and brings their attention back to me. That's the whole purpose of the call and response, to regain control, regain attention so that the learning can move into the next phase.
Okay. Who
And
all
so
stops and look at you?
everybody,
Okay. New teachers, you hear that? Call and response is for everybody to stop and look at you.
everybody.
And that's a good place that when you do call and response and you don't get everybody, that's a good place to pause and fold your arms and look at the ones that didn't respond and say, did you all hear me call? That's a great space to do that in. So thank you
Mhm.
so much for sharing that. Now you
You see, I
also
get excited about this kind of stuff.
yes, you also had a tool in this chapter that you would give teachers to kind of like measure themselves with this. Could you talk about that for a minute? And what is it called and what do they need to? And what are they doing when they implement this?
Got you. So we created a tool called a momentum matrix,
Okay.
right? So because how do you learn? You got to keep the momentum going. Every time you have all of these stop and goes, stop and goes, stop and goes, you're losing momentum.
Mhm.
And when you're losing momentum, kids are losing interest. And when I lose interest, you're reducing the learning, right? So it's called the momentum matrix. And what the momentum matrix pretty much does is it helps you capture where are you losing steam? Where are your areas of growth opportunity? And where are you doing great? You know, you might be good at managing student versus student. You might be great at managing classroom, school versus classroom. But you may not be so great at managing your own internal thoughts. And that's where we lose momentum. Do you know what a lesson plan is? Do you have the copies? Do you know what page you're supposed to be on? Do you know where the kids' work was left from the day before that you can easily get out and pick up? Is the website that you're going to already preloaded? You already have these things in place. Are you worried about what's happening in your own personal life? Are you tired? Is your health in good order? Did you get to school 5 minutes before the bell rung and you know you're a little panic? All of these things you can capture in the momentum matrix because the goal is not to be like, oh, I got you, you doing this wrong. It's reflection. Slow down, reflect, see where you are so that you can be intentional about becoming a great educator. The only way you get to becoming a great educator is by paying attention to the little things that you're doing. And so I'll stop there.
So what how do they use the momentum matrix? What does it look like?
You know, I could send you a copy, right? Because what
Okay.
it basically does is all it is just a good old worksheet, good old handout where you kind of make a note. I believe you could do it better if you invite somebody in to help you with this journey. Every time this happens, take a note of it. Make a
I mean,
note
you
of
had
it. I
something
even
about
suggest
using
put it
tick
on the
marks.
board. Yeah,
You
put
had
it on the
something
board.
about using blue and black tick marks.
Yeah. So if you say, let's just say I want to be intentional, and I just come in and I put it on my board, maybe under my objective, maybe, you know, and I what each thing stands for, student versus student, and put a tick mark for every different interaction that happens. Use different colors is what I suggest. You can use red, blue, black, whatever colors you want. But the goal is to create a visual of what is really happening in the classroom. The invisible things. These are things that happen covertly. But when you add all of these things up, they create what I call the butterfly effect. Because you don't recognize that this interaction is actually creating a bigger issue,
Yeah.
especially if they happen over and over and over again. That changes the course of your classroom. If you think about it, I want you to think about, take yourself back when you were a young teacher and think about when you had just so many different things happening in the room. Student versus student, student versus self, classroom, school versus classroom. I want you to go back in time, right?
Yes.
And I want you to imagine all of these different things that are happening. Did you ever really look at the greater impact of these things? Just say in your classroom, you had a lot of student versus self and a lot of student versus student. how does that impact what you do day to day? Let's since we're in March and we're talking to, well, in February going into, talk about, I want teachers to think about, since they're reflecting this time of year, how does that interact time continue to impact you? Go back in time. What do you remember?
Oh, I remember being very much impactful in terms of being a distraction, in terms of frustration. I can remember like the first 3 weeks of school because I taught students with disabilities. The
Mhm.
assistant principal would just walk in the classroom and walk in the middle of the floor and do a spin around because the former teacher needed that type of support.
Mhm, mhm,
And I can remember it was maybe the week after Labor Day. So, that's pretty still early in the school year
mhm,
for the South. We've been in school maybe a month then.
mhm,
And I can remember the week after Labor Day, he walked in and did the spin around, and all of the students, including myself, looked at him like, "You're distracting us." And he laughed and walked out and didn't come back.
right,
you
right.
know so and I know that's an extreme one right there, but yes, I totally understand what you're saying. It took a lot away from you.
And it's not extreme. I think you think it's extreme, but it happens a lot. It may not even be the principal. Sometimes it's just your teacher bestie checking on you. Sometimes it could be the littlest things, but nobody takes in account how these little things interact because nobody's really thinking about how it impacts my attention as a child. So every time something new happens, a new interaction,
Yes.
sometimes I'm paying more attention to that than I am paying to the teacher,
Yes.
especially if the teacher, I'm going to say this, especially if the teacher is battling with their own internal issues and they're not that charismatic
Mm-hmm.
and they don't know how to bring me back.
Uh-huh.
So if you're battling your own things and you're kind of trapped in your own mind, and I always try to take these interactions and I want teachers to think about the child who doesn't say much, right? I'm compliant. I'm going to do what you pretty much tell me to do. If you never, after, let's just say after that principal came in and did a spin around, and if I was sitting in that classroom, if you did the spin around and you didn't like bring that classroom back into order and you were just like, carry on, guys. I'm thinking about, I wonder where he's going next. Why did he come in here and do that?
Right.
Uh, is is this teacher not good? Are we gonna lose the teacher again? Is this teacher gonna quit like the last teacher
Yeah.
did? Or I might be like, yeah, boy, we got this teacher on the rocks. They
Yeah.
need help. Do I ever go back to the lesson? No.
Right.
Or if I do, it's not at the forefront of my thoughts. I'm just doing
Absolutely. Look, that's why, man, my scholars, we got that cleared up the week after Labor Day. You don't need to come in here for that. This ain't that.
It's not that. I got this, sir. I got this under control.
Absolutely, absolutely.
Oh,
So thank you so much for sharing that. And I like that you said that they can just put that matrix on the board. They can do student to self, student to peer, student to
mhm.
teacher, class, student to classroom, and classroom to school. And just for a day or just for a class period, just put a tick mark anytime they see that and to know whether was it a big distraction or did we
Mhm.
just move back into it. So I like that for teachers to just kind of measure where they are and how much attention they're allowing to be a distraction in their classroom. Do you
Yes,
have,
and then go ahead. I'm sorry.
no, go on.
No, I was just going to say, and in the book, it's a lot more questions, a lot more reflection, and a lot more strategies that teachers can read and understand, like how to respond. What is versus classroom? Because that could be a lot of things. That can even be a fire drill.
Yes.
More recently, one that is really disturbing. is the active shooter drills.
Yes, yes,
You
yes, yes.
know, I
It's
don't
it's
know.
just a lot for our children to have to do that. You know, that's it. You got the earthquake. Now you have active shooter. You have everything. So yes. And imagine what that does to a child
Mhm.
that may even deal with shooting in the neighborhood. And
Right,
school may have been that place of refuge for them. And now I have to practice this at school for real.
for real, for real. So
Yes.
we need to have a plan about how we're going to respond and how we are going to keep the momentum. Because whenever there's momentum, when there's that motion, that movement, kids learn.
Yes. Yes.
And when you lose it, mm,
Yes. Well, Professor Felton, thank you so much for sharing with us. And new teachers, she's not going to give you all of it tonight. I tried to get as much as I could. She said, get the book, Teaching in the Now. Classroom Momentum begins with you. And they can get this on Amazon, right?
yes, they can get it on Amazon.
And the link will be at the bottom of this podcast. This was just a great conversation. Thank you so much because we don't want to be the attention thief in the classroom. It's enough that the students are. So having that time for reflection and knowing who we are and spending that time with ourselves and knowing, are we spending too much time on things because maybe we're not planned out, maybe we're not confident, or do we just not know? So let's make sure that we know and understand that we don't want to be the attention thief. Professor Felton, do you have any parting words that you'd like to share with our new teachers?
I would just say, as this year continues to move along, continue to read, continue to learn, continue to find those teachers who will pour into you and
Yes,
those who are patient with you.
yes,
It is definitely a journey, but remember, you are the center of that classroom. So whatever you are feeling, they are feeling. And that is all.
absolutely. Thank you so much. You are the center of their classroom, and whatever you're feeling, your students are feeling. So we don't expect you to come in and be a robot and not have any feelings. However, we do need to center ourselves because we have a classroom full of students that's dependent on us. And another thing you just said is find people who are will encourage you and find people who will pour into you. Do not spend time around the people that are complaining, that are pointing out everything that's wrong. Spend time around the teachers who have high test scores and they are excited about coming to work because you will learn some strategies from them. So thank you again, Professor Felton, for sharing with our audience. And thank you for joining us this evening on the National New Teacher Support Podcast, brought to you by New Teacher University. I'm your host and principal, Dr. Terry Ross, and we want to thank you so much for joining us because it is our goal to help first-year teachers have a great foundational year so that they will enjoy this year and come back another year. We need you, new teachers. Even if you're a second career new teacher, we
Yes.
need you. We need you, and your students need you. So visit us at the National New Teacher Support Podcast. We are on YouTube at New Teacher University. Please subscribe, like, and share. Our channel is on YouTube, and it's New Teacher University. You'll see the logo when you put New Teacher University into YouTube. So subscribe to our channel and get some of this great information that our professors are sharing with you. So again, thank you for joining us, and we'll see you again next week.